The siren screamed, a lie was born at a gas pump, and a finger was pointed directly at my wife. The cops arrived, grave and serious. They had no idea the truth was written on a receipt, and that it was about to make a mockery of a Karen's. Perfect rage. The late afternoon sun, a bruised orange, bled across the asphalt of the gas station, casting long, distorted shadows that looked like grasping hands. Inside our beat-up Honda Civic, the air was thick with the scent of cheap pine air freshener and the quiet hum of the radio playing a song we both knew but couldn't name. My wife, Sarah, was at the pump. Her shoulders slumped slightly with the day's fatigue. She had her credit card ready, an act so mundane, so routine, it was almost invisible. I was scrolling through my phone, half listening to a podcast, a state of mind that would be violently shattered in a matter of seconds. The moment. The gleaming black Cadillac Escalade pulled up to the adjacent pump. The atmosphere shifted. It didn't just park. It loomed. The vehicle was so ridiculously clean, so impossibly massive, it seemed to absorb the fading light, turning it into a polished, obsidian mirror. A woman, a human monument to self-importance, emerged from the driver's side. Her crisp white tennis dress was blinding against the muted colors of the gas station, and her blonde hair was pulled back into a severe, perfectly coiffed ponytail that seemed to defy gravity. She had the kind of face that had never been told no, and as she walked toward her own pump, her eyes swept over our car and Sarah with a dismissive glance that felt less like a look and more like an audit. The first hint of trouble came in the form of a sharp, impatient sound. The woman, who I'd mentally dubbed Brenda, was trying to insert her credit card, but it wasn't working. She tried again, a little more aggressively this time, the plastic scraping against the machine's slot. A low, frustrated groan escaped her lips, and she gave the machine a single, petulant tap with the back of her hand. Her gaze darted back to Sarah, who was still waiting for her pump to activate. "Excuse me?" Brenda's voice sliced through the tranquil hum. It wasn't a question, but an accusation. "Are you just going to stand there? This pump isn't working and I'm in a hurry." Sarah looked up, a flicker of confusion on her face. "Oh, I'm sorry. I just paid. It should start in a second." Brenda's eyes narrowed. "I don't care if you just paid. Your pump isn't running and mine is broken. You're holding up the line. Some of us have places to be." "There isn't a line," Sarah said, her tone still calm, but a defensive note had crept into it. She gestured to the empty gas station. "It's just me and you." The observation seemed to infuriate Brenda more than anything else. Her face, which had been set in a mask of haughty irritation, contorted into a furious scowl. "That's not the point. The point is you're loitering, and you're taking up a perfectly good pump while you waste time." "I'm not loitering," Sarah said, her voice rising now. The gas pump finally clicked on with a low thrum. She lifted the nozzle. "My car is just old. It takes a second to register." Brenda's phone was in her hand in a flash, the screen glowing like a beacon of self-righteous fury. "I've seen enough. I'm calling the police." I threw open the car door, the cheap plastic scraping the curb. Whoa, hold on. Calling the police? For what?" Brenda didn't even look at me. Her eyes were fixed on Sarah, a triumphant, almost manic glint in them. "For theft. You think I don't see what's happening here? You're clearly using a card that doesn't belong to you. That machine isn't working for a reason and you're trying to steal gas. I know a scam when I see one." The accusation was so ludicrous, so breathtakingly insane, that for a moment I just stared at her, an incredulous laugh bubbling in my throat. But the laugh died when I saw Sarah's face. The exhaustion was gone, replaced by a mixture of shock and genuine fear. "I'm not stealing anything," Sarah stammered, her hand trembling slightly as she held the pump nozzle. "I just paid with my card. I have the receipt. Why would you even think that?" Brenda put the phone to her ear, her voice dripping with a manufactured sense of urgency. "Yes, hello 911. I'd like to report a crime in progress at the Chevron. On Elm and First, there's a woman here in a beat-up Honda Civic. She's clearly trying to steal gas. I tried to use her pump, and the machine wouldn't even register her card. She's acting suspiciously. She's looking around nervously and won't make eye contact. Yes, she's about 5'5", brown hair, wearing a... Brenda's eyes raked over. My wife, her words a cutting, venomous description that reduced Sarah to a caricature of a criminal. The phone call felt like an act of emotional assault. Sarah's face was pale, and her eyes were wide with a growing panic. "She's calling the police," she whispered to me, as if she couldn't believe it herself. "Just ignore her, babe," I said, my voice low. "She's unhinged. She's not going to get anyone to come out here for this." But the sirens were already a low, distant wail on the evening air. They grew louder, a shrill, piercing cry that seemed to amplify Brenda's self-satisfaction. She hung up the phone with a flourish, her chest puffed out, her posture radiating an air of someone who had just saved the world. "See?" she sneered. "The police are on their way. They'll sort this out." A few minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled into the gas station with a silent grace that was unnerving. 2 officers, one tall and stoic, the other shorter with a neatly trimmed mustache, got out of their cars. They were all business, their faces unreadable, their movements precise. Brenda, seeing her saviors arrive, strode towards them like a general greeting her troops. "Officers, thank goodness you're here," she said, her voice a little too loud, a little too dramatic. She pointed a perfectly manicured finger at Sarah, who was now frozen, the gas nozzle still in her car's tank. "That woman right there. She's trying to steal gas. I saw her. The pump wasn't working, and then she magically got it to work, but she wouldn't move. She's a thief, I tell you." The tall officer, Officer Davis, I saw from his name tag, held up a hand. "Ma'am, let's calm down. Let's get the story straight. Can you tell us what happened?" Brenda launched into a fevered, embellished version of events, painting herself as a public-spirited citizen and Sarah as a cunning, desperate criminal. The second officer, Officer Ramirez, walked over to our car, his eyes sweeping over the license plate, the car itself, then to me, then to Sarah. My wife was visibly trembling. Her face was flushed, her jaw tight. It was one thing to be verbally accosted by a stranger. It was another to be treated like a suspect by actual police officers. "All right." "Ma'am," Officer Ramirez said to Sarah, his voice flat and professional, "can you tell us what happened from your perspective?" Sarah's voice was a shaky whisper. I just pulled up to get gas. My car is a little slow to recognize the payment sometimes. The pump wasn't on right away and she got angry. About it. I have the receipt. I just paid for it," Brenda scoffed. "A receipt? Anyone can print a fake receipt. She's lying." Officer Ramirez glanced at Brenda, then back at Sarah, a long, assessing look. He held out his hand. "Do you have that receipt, ma'am?" Sarah fumbled for it, her fingers trembling as she pulled the thin, curled slip of paper from her pocket. She handed it to the officer, her eyes pleading. Officer Ramirez took the receipt, and his face, which had been so perfectly neutral, began to change. He looked at the paper, then at Sarah, then back at the paper. A strange flicker of a smile played on his lips. He looked at his partner, who was now leaning in to read the small slip of paper, and the grim line of his mouth began to waver. The grim line of Officer Ramirez's mouth broke first. It was a slight twitch at the corner, barely perceptible, but it was there. Officer Davis, his partner, saw it, and a similar, suppressed muscle contraction pulled at his lips. Brenda, her arms crossed triumphantly, seemed to interpret their reactions as the first signs of victory. She straightened, her haughty posture swelling with smug satisfaction. "See?" she said, her voice a low, throaty rumble of vindication. "She's a liar. I knew it. A fake receipt, probably." Officer Ramirez slowly raised his head, his eyes moving from the thin, crumpled paper to Brenda's flushed, expectant face. He didn't say a word, but the flicker of a smile that had appeared on his face a moment ago now blossomed into a full, unabashed grin. He lifted the receipt so his partner could see it better. Officer Davis, who had been leaning in with a serious expression, took one look at the paper and let out a single explosive burst of laughter that was immediately stifled by a cough. He turned his head away, his shoulders shaking with the effort of controlling himself. The sight of the two officers, their faces a mixture of professional stoicism and barely contained mirth, hit Brenda like a bucket of ice water. Her triumphant expression melted into a mask of pure confusion. "What? What's so funny?" she demanded, her voice rising in pitch. "What are you two laughing at? This is a crime. She's a thief." Officer Ramirez, his voice still a little shaky from the laughter, managed to speak. "Ma'am, your pump isn't working, that is true, but the reason this lovely woman," he gestured to Sarah, "is taking so long is not because she's stealing gas." He held up the receipt again, this time so Brenda could see it. "She's not even buying gas." Brenda squinted at the paper, her eyes narrowing as she tried to make sense of the faded thermal print. She took a step closer, her nose wrinkling in indignation. "That's impossible! She's at the pump! I saw her!" Officer Ramirez's voice was now perfectly flat, the humor gone, replaced by a cutting sense of irony. "The receipt says she paid for $87.12 worth of snack food and drinks, and a single lottery ticket, all on the same transaction." The words hung in the air, a punchline to a joke Brenda hadn't understood. The silence was deafening, broken only by the low hum of the gas pump. Brenda's face went from indignant confusion to a fiery red of abject humiliation. She looked at Sarah, then back at the receipt, then at the officers, as if searching for a hidden meaning, a reason for her grand pronouncement to be true. But there was nothing. The truth was as simple and ridiculous as it sounded. Sarah had paid for a car full of junk food and was now standing at the pump, confused and frightened, because she had been accused of grand larceny over a bag of chips. That's ridiculous," Brenda sputtered, the words little, more than an enraged puff of air. "That receipt is a forgery! It has to be! I saw her! She was acting suspicious! Don't you believe me? I called you here." Officer Davis, having regained his composure, stepped forward. His voice was calm, but the authority in it was absolute. "Ma'am, we have the receipt right here. The transaction code, the timestamp, the itemized list. It's all here. There is no evidence of a crime being committed. The only person acting suspiciously, according to the security cameras and this receipt, is you." He gestured to the gas station's security cameras, their unblinking glass eyes a silent testimony to Brenda's escalating tantrum. Her bravado, which had been so absolute just moments before, began to crack. She looked at the cameras, a flicker of panic in her eyes, as if she had just realized she was being watched. I was just trying to help," she stammered, her voice thin and desperate. "You people are supposed to protect me. I'm a law-abiding citizen." Officer Ramirez stepped forward, his expression hardening. "Ma'am, calling 911 for a non-emergency is a violation. Filing a false report is a very serious charge." The word charge seemed to hit Brenda like a physical blow. Her face went slack with shock. The anger that had consumed her for the last 10 minutes evaporated, replaced by a cold, stomach-churning fear. This wasn't a win for her. This wasn't about teaching some thief a lesson. This was about to blow up in her face. A charge?" she stammered. "You can't do that. I was just mistaken. It's a simple mistake. I was worried about public safety." "Public safety?" Officer Davis scoffed, unable to hide his disgust. "You called the cops on a woman buying $87 worth of candy bars and a lottery ticket. That's not public safety, ma'am. That's harassment." Brenda's eyes darted between the two officers and Sarah, her composure completely shattered. She had overplayed her hand, and the realization hit her like a sledgehammer. She had been so consumed by her own self-righteous fury that she had forgotten the basic, immutable fact of the universe, that actions have consequences. Officer Ramirez pulled out his citation pad. The small gesture felt as significant as a gavel striking wood. "We're going to give you a citation for filing a false report. You can contest it in court if you'd like, but I wouldn't recommend it. We have your phone call on record. We have security footage, and we have the receipt right here, not to mention the word of this woman and her husband." He looked directly at Brenda, his voice low and firm, every word a nail in her emotional coffin. "And ma'am, for what it's worth, her card wasn't working on your pump because you were trying to pay for her gas, not the other way around." The final sentence was the killing blow. Brenda's face, which had been pale with fear, now drained of all color. She looked at the pump she had been trying to use, then at the numbers on the screen. The machine, in its quiet, unassuming way, had been trying to complete a transaction for Sarah's credit card, which was still logged in from her failed attempt to get gas. Brenda's indignation, her rage, her false accusations, all of it had been based on a simple, deeply ironic misunderstanding. She hadn't been trying to catch a thief. She had been trying to pay for someone else's purchase. The humiliation was a physical thing, a crushing weight that bent her shoulders and made her head swim. The perfect, polished facade she had presented to the world was now in a million tiny pieces on the oily asphalt. The two officers with their citation pad and their quiet laughter had just delivered a brutal, undeniable lesson in karmic justice. Brenda's mouth opened and closed, a silent, gurgling gasp of defeat. She looked at the numbers on the pump screen, the tiny, insignificant digit of the transaction total, and her entire world seemed to crumble. Her grand, public spectacle of righteous fury had just been exposed as a pathetic, self-inflicted farce. The humiliation was a physical thing, a crushing weight that bent her shoulders and made her head swim. The perfect, polished facade she had presented to the world was now in a million tiny pieces on the oily asphalt. "No, no, that's not right," she stammered, her voice barely a whisper. "That's not what happened. It's a mistake. A simple mistake." Officer Ramirez didn't even look up from his citation pad. "Ma'am, a mistake is forgetting your wallet. A mistake is putting the wrong kind of gas in your car. This was a direct and intentional filing of a false police report and a direct accusation of a crime against this woman and her husband. We have your name, your car, and your phone number. You'll be hearing from us." His words were flat and final, a legalistic hammer blow to her pathetic excuse. Brenda's eyes darted around the now silent gas station, as if looking for a witness, an ally, anyone who would believe her. There was no one. The few customers who had trickled in had stopped to stare, their faces a mixture of confusion and morbid curiosity. Then a new voice cut through the tension, calm and authoritative. "Ramirez, is there a problem here?" A man in a navy blue gas station uniform, an embroidered patch on his chest reading Mr. Chen, manager, walked out of the store. He was a small, wiry man with a kind face and a shrewd look in his eyes that took in the entire scene in an instant. He held a clipboard in his hand. Officer Ramirez nodded. "Mr. Chen, we're just wrapping up. This woman here," he gestured to Brenda with the tip of his pen, "called 911 on a false report of theft. She was trying to accuse a customer of stealing gas." Mr. Chen's expression didn't change, but his eyes narrowed slightly as they landed on Brenda. "Ah, her. I've seen you before, haven't I? You were the one who demanded a discount because the coffee was too hot." The comment was a quiet grenade, and it detonated right in Brenda's face. She flushed a deeper red, her mouth a thin, angry line. "That has nothing to do with this!" "Actually, it has everything to do with this," Mr. Chen said, his voice still low but with a new edge of steel. "I've been watching the security feed. You were the aggressor from the moment you pulled in. You made a false accusation. You filed a false police report. This gas station does not tolerate harassment of our customers. I've already saved the footage to a hard drive for the police. You're banned from this location. Effective immediately." The pronouncement was so quiet, so devoid of drama, that it was even more devastating than the citation. The gas station, a place she considered beneath her, a mere backdrop for her errands, was now a place she was no longer allowed to frequent. Her privilege, her sense of entitlement, had just been so casually, so completely revoked. Brenda stood there, a defeated statue of her former self. The humiliation was so complete, so all-encompassing, that she didn't even try to argue. She simply turned, her head bowed, and walked toward her gleaming black Escalade, her shoulders slumped in, a posture of utter defeat. The car that had loomed with such authority now seemed like a hollow shell, an empty symbol of a power that had just been so brutally stripped away. As she drove away, a new silence settled over the gas station, a quiet calm that replaced the shrieking tension. Officer Ramirez finally put his citation pad away and walked over to us. He looked at Sarah, whose hands were still shaking slightly, and his expression softened. "Ma'am, I apologize for this. This was an unnecessary escalation. We'll be in touch. If you decide to press charges for harassment, you can file a report with the station. We've got all the evidence we need right here." He pointed to his body camera, a small, black square on his chest, which had been recording the entire encounter. He looked from Sarah to me, a quiet, assessing gaze. "You don't have to do anything else. This woman is going to have a rough day. And a rough day in court, I imagine. But if you want to make a formal complaint, the option is there." He gave us a small, respectful nod and walked back to his patrol car. Officer Davis was already waiting, a silent partner in this strange, surreal act of justice. They got in their cars, and with a quiet hum, they pulled away, leaving us alone in the growing dusk. The air around us felt different, lighter, as if a great weight had been lifted. The gas pump, which had been the silent antagonist in this whole affair, clicked off, the transaction complete. Sarah slowly took the nozzle out of the tank and replaced it. She looked at me, her eyes wide, still full of a residual fear that would take days to fully fade. I don't believe that just happened," she said, her voice a shaky whisper. I walked over and put an arm around her, pulling her close. "I know, babe. Me neither. The whole thing was so absurd. An accusation of theft over a few bags of chips and a lottery ticket. The lottery ticket." I looked down at the receipt still clutched in my hand, the flimsy paper that had held all the evidence of Brenda's colossal error. It felt almost sacred now, a holy relic of karmic justice. The itemized list was at the bottom, just above the total. "Lottery ticket, $5. I pulled my arm away from Sarah and looked at her, a strange, half-formed thought in my head. "Hey, do you still have that lottery ticket?" Sarah reached into her pocket and pulled it out, a small, folded rectangle of cardstock. The whole incident was so insane, the idea of checking the ticket now felt like the only logical conclusion to the madness. The least it could do was be a winner, a small reward for a massive emotional ordeal. I took the ticket from her, my thumb scraping against the silvery scratch-off surface. The numbers beneath it were already a blur. "What if it's a big winner?" Sarah said, a tiny, nervous giggle escaping her lips. The words felt like a joke, a dark piece of humor to get through the surreal moment. We laughed, a single, sharp exhale of a laugh that held all the fear, anger, and relief of the last 10 minutes. I looked down at the ticket, then began to scratch. A single number appeared, then another, then another. The numbers began to line up in a neat, symmetrical row. The first few were small, but as I continued to scratch, the numbers grew. A small, trembling knot formed in my stomach. The air, which had just moments ago been filled with the stench of oil and the fear of a false accusation, now felt electric with a strange, impossible kind of hope. The final number came into view, and my heart stopped. The $100,000 figure shimmered on the ticket, a fragile, impossible mirage of silver ink and paper. I stared at it, my brain refusing to process the information. It felt like a cruel joke, a surreal punchline to the most insane afternoon of our lives. My hand, which had been so steady as I'd faced down a self-appointed vigilante and 2 police officers, now trembled uncontrollably. The lottery ticket, a simple rectangle of cardstock, felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. "Babe," I said, my voice a strangled whisper. "Babe, look!" Sarah leaned in, her eyes wide and disbelieving. She looked at the ticket, then at me, then back at the ticket. Her hands went to her mouth, and a quiet, gasping sob escaped her lips. It wasn't a sob of sadness or fear, but of pure, unadulterated relief. The fear, the humiliation, the panic that had been a tight knot in her chest for the last hour, all of it seemed to release in that single, profound moment. "No way," she breathed, her voice filled with a reverence I'd never heard from her before. Is that real? Are you sure?" I held the ticket up to the fading light. The numbers were clear, undeniable. There was no mistaking it. It was a winner. The absurdity of it all was overwhelming. We had just been humiliated and terrorized by a complete stranger, and now, in the exact same spot, we had won more money than we made in a year. The universe had taken a sledgehammer to our quiet, predictable lives. But instead of crushing us, it had uncovered a treasure. "Let's go." "Now," I said, my voice a little too loud, a little too urgent. The gas station felt tainted, a stage for a drama that was still too raw to comprehend. We got back in the car, our movements uncoordinated and clumsy, like puppets with their strings cut. I fumbled with the key, my heart still racing a mile a minute. The engine turned over with a familiar groan, a sound that, just moments ago, had felt like a symbol of our quiet, monotonous existence. Now, it was the sound of a getaway vehicle. We drove in silence, the car filled with the same pine air freshener and the soft hum of the radio, but everything was different. The silence was not quiet or comfortable. It was charged with the immense, unspoken weight of what had just happened. Sarah reached over and put her hand over mine on the gear shift. Her fingers were still shaking. "I was so scared," she said, her voice soft. "When she called the police, I thought I was going to jail. For something I didn't even do." "I know," I said, my own voice still tight with the lingering adrenaline. "I know." The memory of Brenda's face, her triumphant sneer, the cold, accusing tone of her voice. It was all still so vivid. But now the memory was a little less painful, a little less sharp. The $100,000 didn't erase the humiliation, but it did put it in its proper perspective. It was a petty, insignificant speck of dirt on a canvas that had just been repainted with a brilliant, life-changing stroke of luck. We didn't go straight home. Home, with its familiar bills and responsibilities, felt too real, too small for the magnitude of what had just happened. We drove to a quiet, dimly lit diner on the edge of town, a place we'd never been before, a neutral territory to process the impossible. We sat in a worn leather booth, the smell of old coffee and fried food a comforting anchor in our new reality. The waitress, a tired-looking woman with a name tag that read Betty, brought us 2 glasses of water and left us to our silence. "What do we do?" Sarah asked, her eyes still fixed on the lottery ticket I had placed carefully on the table between us. A small, life-altering artifact. I don't know," I admitted. It was the honest truth. Our whole life, our whole world view had been about scraping by, about budgeting, about making it to the next paycheck. We had dreams, of course. A small house, maybe a new car, a vacation. That didn't involve a long drive and a cheap hotel. but they had always been distant, hazy things relegated to the realm of impossible fantasies. This was different. This was real. "We pay off the student loans," Sarah said, her voice gaining a new sense of purpose. "All of them. And the credit card debt. And we can fix the car. Really fix it, not just the cheap repairs." She was listing our quiet, personal failures, the things we had always carried with us like a secret weight. But as she said them out loud, they didn't feel like failures anymore. They felt like problems that had just been solved. The money, which had seemed like a symbol of freedom, was now a tool of liberation. "What about Brenda?" I asked, the name a venomous hiss in the quiet of the diner. Sarah's eyes, which had been bright with a new sense of possibility, hardened. The memory of the injustice, the sheer cruelty of the accusation, had not been forgotten. It was still there, a festering wound beneath the surface of the joy. "What about her?" she asked. I picked up the lottery ticket, running my thumb over the winning numbers. "She tried to ruin us. Over nothing, over a few bags of chips. She called the cops on you because of her own arrogance. She got humiliated, sure, but she'll just find another victim, another gas station to harass, another person to terrorize." A quiet, dangerous idea began to form in my mind, a plan born out of a mix of triumph and residual anger. It felt both ludicrous and perfect, a grand gesture of defiance. "I don't want her to get away with it," I said, my voice low and fierce. "Not really. I want to make sure she remembers this day, and I want to do it in a way she'll never see coming." Sarah looked at me, her eyes, which had just been full of relief, now filled with a new, dangerous sparkle. A look of quiet understanding passed between us, a shared commitment to a revenge that would be so perfect, so elegant, it would be almost beautiful. We had been humiliated by a woman who thought she was better than us, by a woman who saw us as insignificant, as a class of people who would never amount to anything. The money was our chance to prove her wrong, and not just by living a better life, but by making a statement. I held up the ticket. "I have an idea. It's crazy, but it's worth a shot." Sarah smiled, a genuine, joyful smile that I hadn't seen since before the gas station. "What is it?" she asked, a silent challenge in her voice. I leaned in, and as I told her my plan, the quiet anger that had been simmering inside me for the last few hours finally found a home, a purpose. The plan was audacious. It was risky. And it was the only way to truly close the book on the most insane afternoon of our lives. The final word of the plan hung in the air between us, a quiet declaration of war, not with a citation or a police report, but with a $100,000 check. My idea hung in the air between us, as quiet and profound as the unspoken truths that had always defined our lives. It was audacious, ridiculous, and perfect. Sarah's eyes, still sparkling with a dangerous mischief, waited. "We're going to thank her," I said, my voice barely a whisper. "Publicly." Sarah's brow furrowed in confusion. "Thank her? For what? For humiliating me? For calling the cops?" "Exactly," I said, a slow, grim smile spreading across my face. I picked up the lottery ticket, the paper feeling almost hot with the weight of its secret. "Think about it. She called the cops on you because of this ticket. She accused you of grand theft, of being a liar. She saw us as insignificant, as people who deserve to be treated like criminals. Well, she was wrong. This ticket is the ultimate proof of that." I gestured around the quiet, empty diner. "We don't just take the money and disappear. We do something with it, something she can't ignore. We make a statement that she, of all people, will have to see every single day." I laid out the plan, and with every word, a new kind of energy filled the booth. We would take a small portion of the winnings and hire an advertising agency. We would buy the biggest, most prominent billboard we could, one that was visible from the highway, and, most importantly, one that was directly across the street from the gas station. On it, we would put up an image of a lottery ticket, the winning numbers clearly visible. And the text would be simple, a single devastatingly ironic message. To the woman who called 911 at the pump, thank you for the good luck. The universe has a funny way of working. Sarah's eyes widened, a slow smile spreading across her face. It was a genuine smile, one of pure, unadulterated joy. It wasn't just about the money anymore. It was about the principle of it all. It was about standing up for ourselves, not with an angry retort or a legal filing, but with a grand, public, perfectly timed act of karmic grace. It's brilliant, she said, her voice filled with a reverence I hadn't heard since she had said I do. It's absolutely brilliant. We left the diner an hour later, our minds buzzing with a quiet, fierce excitement. The fear and humiliation were gone, replaced by a sense of purpose. We were no longer victims, we were the architects of our own brand of justice. The next day was a blur of phone calls and appointments. We were a little nervous at the lottery office, but the process was surprisingly simple. The ticket was a legitimate winner. We filled out the paperwork, the numbers on the form feeling both impossibly large and entirely real. It would take a few days for the check to clear, but the money was ours. We were on our way. The real challenge came when we met with an advertising agency. The sleek, modern office was a world away from the grimy gas station, and the ad executive, a young slick man named Ryan, raised an eyebrow as we explained our request. "So you want to put up a billboard, thanking someone for a false police report?" he asked, a hint of confusion in his voice. "It's more than that," I explained, my voice firm. "It's about an act of kindness, a moment of karmic synchronicity. We were accused of being thieves, and it turns out we were just lucky. This is about showing that." Ryan was skeptical. "Legally, this could be tricky. It could be seen as libel. We'd have to word it carefully." "We've already worded it," Sarah said, her voice a steel trap of certainty. "It's not an accusation. It's a thank you. We're not saying who it is. We're not mentioning a name. We're just expressing our gratitude." The subtle shift in our tone, the quiet confidence that had replaced the fear, seemed to impress him. He leaned back in his chair, a slow smile spreading across his face. "You know what? I love it. It's insane. It's viral. It's poetic. We'll get it done." The next few days were the longest of our lives. We drove past the gas station constantly, our heads craned to look at the massive blank billboard, the empty canvas of our future. We imagined what it would look like: the bold letters, the shining lottery ticket, the quiet, subtle, and devastating message. We felt a sense of anticipation that was almost unbearable, a feeling that had been completely absent from our lives for as long as we could remember. Finally, the day arrived. We got the call from Ryan late in the afternoon. "It's up. You'll want to go see this." The sun was setting, casting a golden hue over the dusty asphalt lot. We parked across the street, in the lot of a strip mall, and got out of the car. The billboard loomed against the darkening sky, a bright, triumphant beacon of fluorescent light. The lottery ticket was even bigger than we had imagined, the winning numbers impossible to miss, and the words, our words, shone with a quiet, unassailable power. To the woman who called 911 at the pump, thank you for the good luck. The universe has a funny way of working. It was perfect, it was beautiful, and it was exactly what we had planned. We stood there, our arms around each other, watching the cars on the highway pass, their drivers craning their necks to look at the strange, beautiful, and utterly confusing message. Our brand of justice was now on full display. Then, a familiar car pulled into the gas station. It was a black Escalade, its windows tinted, its body gleaming under the harsh station lights. We watched, a silent, sickening knot forming in my stomach. As Brenda got out of the car, she was on her phone, her back to the road. She was on her way to the pump. The pump she was now banned from using. She ended her call and looked up, and as she did, her eyes fell on the billboard. She froze, her body going completely rigid. She took a step back, her head tilting, as if to make sure what she was seeing was real. And it was. The colors were too bright, the message was too clear, and the message, a public, undeniable slap in the face, was a thank you note from the universe with her name on it. Her mouth opened in a silent, perfect gasp of recognition, and a low, guttural sound escaped her lips.